and welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, Chinese President Xi has flown to Germany to meet Chancellor Angela Merkel, while the U.S. under Trump turns toward isolationism. Can the partnership between China and Germany become more important in offering global leadership? Tensions between India and China flared up after Indian troops crossed into Chinese territory. Does this border standoff have wider geopolitical implications? And we start in Berlin, where Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived for his second state visit to Germany, aiming to cement ties with this major European country. China and Germany have enjoyed warm ties in recent years, and Xi hopes that can be extended to Europe as a whole. When meeting with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Chinese President Xi Jinping said China supports the European Union to be united, stable, prosperous, and open. To know more, take a look at this.
The second leg of Xi's European tour. After Russia, the Chinese president arrived in Berlin and met with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The two leaders hailed the relationship between the two countries, calling it a comprehensive strategic partnership. They also oversaw the signing of cooperation deals in the fields of aerospace, machinery supplies, aviation, and automotive industries, as well as panda research cooperation.
在双方共同努力下
Under the joint efforts of both sides, China-Germany relations have entered a new stage of high-level development. And our bilateral ties will set an example for all China-EU relations.
We already started last night, obviously with the topics like the DPRK, but also the United Nations rule and the preparation for the G20 summit, where we negotiations. We want a quick signing of an investment treaty which will one day lead to a full free trade agreement with China.
During their meeting, trade will top the agenda. The trade volume between the two countries was boosted last year when China became Germany's largest trading partner for the first time. So in the meeting with Chancellor Merkel, she will encourage more German companies to participate in the Belt and Road Initiative.
At the highest level show that relations are extremely good. And furthermore, China has become our most important trading partner just by end of 2016.
President Xi hopes that this visit will help promote China's relationship with the EU, given that Germany is a core member of the EU. The two leaders agree on how important free trade is in the world today. However, since U.S. President Donald Trump took office, some of his policies and slogans have heralded the rise of protectionism. After Trump's decision to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Agreement, German Chancellor Angela Merkel promised to uphold the deal on climate change. So, in the upcoming G20 summit in Hamburg, how will things develop is anyone's guess.
So what's in store for these relations between China and Germany? Let's go to our panelists. Join me here in the Beijing studio. First of all, Wang Yiwei, Director of the Center for EU Studies at Renmin University. And also with us here in the Beijing studio, we have for the very first time Hannah Muller, who is the Chief Representative in Greater China of BDI, which is the Federation of German Industry. Welcome, ma'am. And also joining us in Berlin, inside Germany, Timo Lohocki, who is a Transatlantic Fellow with the European Program at the German Marshall Fund. Welcome as well, sir. So let me begin by asking you your reactions to the latest talks between the two presidents. I mean, Chinese president and German chancellor. One of the things both of them have been talking about, Professor Wang, is the word new. Remember the Chinese president, when he was talking to the German chancellor, he said this is a new starting point. There has to be new ways for interacting with one another. These are all phrases that he used. New. Are we really in a very brand new start?
Definitely, it's a new hire of our relations. Firstly, we are focused on some new areas like the global commerce, cybersecurity, digital economy, e-commerce, and the Arctic, also deep ocean. This year, the year of the blue between China and the European Union. So Germany definitely take a leading role. And the second new, I think, new engines, not just the trade, technology transfer, but also because of the industrial 4.0 of Germany, with the synergy of the strategies with the Chinese manufacturing of the 2025. So these are the new engines for innovation of the future-oriented economy. And of course, a new mission. Because of the Mr. Trump, we stopped the climate change deal of Paris, and then Germany and China have pushed forward with the globalization and then the global governance, particularly in climate change.
All right. A lot of new things going on over there. There certainly could be a brand new start. And yet, how much of it, Ms. Mueller, from your business perspective, depends on Washington's relations with both Berlin and Beijing, respectively? Yeah. And how is that going to have an impact on the overall bilateral relations between Berlin and Beijing themselves?
I think we are all facing new times at the moment and new challenges. And I think we are in a phase where we have some uncertainty at the moment, and we are all not sure what is going to happen. So I think that, of course, we should search for reliable partners. We should search for partners we have common ground with. And I think China and Germany could be those partners. And
what are the common grounds are we talking about here?
For example, trade, investment, I mean from a business perspective, and cooperation in the field of innovation, for example.
But it hasn't been the case throughout the years, I mean, China and Germany.
Yes, but I think in those times we really should, where globalization is really under pressure, we should advocate globalization and free trade and environment and climate protection. So this is the right time to really stick together and advocate for all those things.
I want to go to the point directly of this relationship. Ms. Lohaki, how big do you think China and Germany when it comes to options for one another in a very dramatic world?
I do think, as we just heard beforehand, I think the prime binding tie between both countries in these very times is predictability, that both partners can rely on each other, which means these are two partners which, when they have differences, they trust each other to solve these in a way which are not of immediate harm to the other actor. However, I do think it's very important to emphasize that this is a very pragmatic partnership which is not based on values. Germany and China have very different understandings when it comes to democracy or minority protection, which means this is a partnership which needs to be renewed issue by issue. So as big as the agreements are on trade, as massive the differences are on other issues. Point is, though, that both partners, both countries trust each other, that these differences can be dealt with in a productive and, very important, predictable fashion.
Yeah. Professor Wang, just to follow what Mr. Lohaki said, how sustainable as a result of what Mr. Lohaki said, that the two sides do not necessarily have an ideological common ground, or not as much as to say, between Germany and the United States. And therefore, will this partnership be stable? Particularly when we talk about really bigger issues, not just trade, because China and Germany did very well in trade over the past decades, but more than the regional leadership when it's come to global affair consultations.
Well, we should go beyond the ideology, diplomacy, even values. I think China and Germany now have more common values, not just necessarily in domestic affairs, internationally, like the multilateralism, global governance. These are also common values and share future, I think, between each other. And United Nations, I think they also very highlight
the role of the United Nations to be emphasized.
And even domestically, I think that China's social reform, political reform, economic reform also benefit and learn many things from Germany. And now they share many similar common grounds on the sustainable development, the green economy, like the Silk Road. I think still have some new common values.
I'm going to come back to you in a while, but for now I want to go to you, Ms. Mueller. You got a lot of things on hand for Germany right now.
Yes.
I mean, unprecedented leadership role, possibly, whether you want to use that word or not, inside Europe, within the EU for Germany. Secondly, big election coming up. Just started the campaign. Chancellor Merkel submitted her papers as well to show her policies as a candidate. So meanwhile, you also have this transatlantic relationship, pretty much very uncertain ever in the history. So a lot of things for Germany, a lot at stake Is China really the option?
I think China is one option. Of course, we have to see how things are going. But I think one of the most important things right now is, and one of the good things about all the insecurity, that we have the feeling that Europe really sticks together right now. So we have a new elected president in France, and we're quite happy about the result of this election. So I think we within Europe should stick together and see what options we have. But within Europe, we have an option. But China, of course, is an option as well.
But what would all of these uncertainties, as I mentioned earlier, about Germany, eventually have on your relationship with China? Because we all function because of domestic politics, and we all function as a result also of international relations.
Yes, I would agree. We really need reliable partners. So we need partners who really stick to their promises, and we need trustful partners, reliable partners. And I think in a lot of areas, especially in the economic area, China and Germany really showed in the past that they are reliable to each other. I mean, both countries consider each other as a strategic partner. And it's not just economically, it's on various fields they really work together. And of course there are issues where we don't agree, but still we have a lot of exchange, and we are reliable to each other.
Even in the field of media, I know there's a platform going on between China and Germany. That's really amazing. Having said that, though, let's talk about specifics. Mr. Lohaki, Belt and Road Initiative, that's what China has been providing to the world as an idea and a platform. What role can Germany play? And how can China and Germany both have win-win in this process of developing this idea and initiative? That's a huge question, but if I could ask for your understanding, answer that within a minute or two, Mr. Lohaki.
Well, that's a $10 billion question, I would say.
Well, I think more than $10 billion that we are talking about here. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, you're right. I do think what is though helpful, especially important to bear in mind for a Chinese audience, is that Germany is extremely reliant on its European partners. So when you refer to Germany and trade with Germany, economic cooperations with Germany, it's important that the prime point of access is the European Commission, via which all trade negotiations have to go through in Europe, and that the prime partner for Germany is, for one, France and the core European partners, and then of course it's also China. And that means that all cooperations China and Germany want to embark upon need to take into consideration that Germany is not eager, nor willing, nor interested in sidelining its European partners, as it has to balance out the interests of its prime trading partners over here in Europe.
Right.
So we just heard from Ms. Müller that the French play a very key role in this, and the French might have a very different understanding of economic cooperation as the Germans do. So I would say let's take these cooperations not with a grain of salt, but this is about the European Union and not so much about Germany as a whole.
Yeah, but you didn't answer my question directly. I was thinking, which philosophical side are you going to right here? But anyway, let me go to Professor Wang for that. A Belt and Road Initiative, much hope in terms of China-German cooperation, or China-German bringing into a third-party country to work on some of the project, which is a brand new idea.
This is particularly for the 16+1 China CEE countries. For a long time, Germany and the European Union concerned about that so-called divide and rule of the Europe. Actually, it's not that case, because those countries actually the value chains strongly connected with Germany. So now China and Germany work together to discover the third-party market in the 16+1.
Eastern European
Yeah, I think that's a very win-win cooperation. It's very good, not just the situations of
I know a lot of the German enterprises and companies here that have representative office here. They're very excited about this.
Yes.
Extremely excited. I'm sure you know more than I do about that. Yeah, Ms. Miller.
Yes, I mean, we welcome the initiative, and it's said to be from the Chinese side that it's inclusive. And of course, our companies are very interested in seeing what's going on and in which field we can cooperate. Still, we need some more information. if it really comes to projects, in which way we are able to take part in this. But we're
it
very
is an
interested.
idea still being developed, as you
Yes,
may know,
yes.
and the next meeting will take place the year after this one.
Yes.
So a lot of interactions likely to happen in this regard. Having said that, there's another aspect of it, which is innovation. All of you mentioned about that. German, you have something like the Industry 4.0, and China has something like a Made in China 2025. But will China and Germany become competitors in certain areas, and will that spoil the whole atmosphere of this cooperation in trade? Professor Wang.
Maybe, because now made in China also in the global value chains
Moving up.
moving up. Now in general in the middle, but some like the Huawei and then IT maybe catch up with the top, like 5G. But still, there are huge potential complementary cooperations areas. As I said, like 5G, the IPv6, the new digital economy, and also the gap between China, made in China and made in Germany is still quite huge, manufacturally.
Yeah.
And Germany also want to learn from China's so-called the Internet Plus, because China, practice, so-called 4 new China innovation,
Yeah.
WeChat, like mobile, like high-speed railway and many things. I think Germany also want to share some experience of the digitalization of the economy.
China is not only just catching up with the digital divide, but rather now leading some of the trends in the digitalization of our future. That's one thing. But the other thing is Germany, Ms. Mueller, with all of your colleagues' work, managed even to have China trade surplus with China. One of the very few developed economies managed to do so. What is the secret behind this?
I think it's the quality of German products. So still, I mean,
You can see she is very proud about saying this.
I am.
The only economies over here and
Of
industries.
course I am.
That's the quality of our product. But Mr. Lohaki, the path between China and Germany when it comes to trade cooperation, what kind of inspiration that can really provide to the other developed economies when they are complaining about this, a trade gap with China, for example, the United States? What specific actions and real work should they do in order to do it well with China? I think Germany provides an extremely interesting case study.
I do think it's very, very difficult to deduct lessons learned, if you will, between German-China cooperation, because you have 2 very distinct actors meeting. You have 2 very powerful regional players with a trade surplus on the one hand, and on the other hand, a very efficient, productive economy, and which are actors which are not only economically vibrant, but also politically very influential in the region. So I do think it's very, very difficult to find another pair, you might say, as Germany and China, which would share these similar scope conditions. As I said, other European economies, for instance France, or least to mention the UK after Brexit, they have different economic interests than Germany does. So I do think I would be very, very cautious to draw too many lessons from German-Chinese cooperation for other bipartisan.
This is an analyst talking, very careful about everything. We have come to a conclusion. As we mentioned earlier, Germany is China's largest trading partner in Europe, and last year China became Germany's top trade partner. Bilateral trade reached about $160 billion last year, or 30% of the total trade between China and the European Union. You see the numbers over there. Okay, so we are almost reaching the end of this round of discussion, but there's one question extremely important. That is, what's going to happen after this meeting between the Chinese president and German chancellor? Next day, German chancellor going to meet with the U.S. president. It's likely to be a very interesting meeting. Meanwhile, you're going to see the G20, with climate change certainly being the very top of the issue over there, and big fight likely to take place. So, what is going to be the nature of the next few days that we are, ladies and gentlemen, to experience? Is this the day for us to understand better about who is likely to be the leaders of the world? Or is this the day that is we are going to see some of the interesting improvising solutions to the deadlocks we're seeing these days? As they say, lady first, lady go first with the difficult questions. Ms. Mueller.
I don't think that it's like the day where we really see things through and where we can say, okay, now I know everything. But I think actually it's a good thing that we have G20 and that we have a lot of dialogue and exchange. So I think for every challenge, for every problem, exchange and dialogue is the first step to solve it. So I think it's a good thing that all the leaders meet, and of course we will see who's going to say what, who will position itself in what direction. But I don't think that it's like the huge, okay, now we know everything.
What can we expect though?
I think we can expect that maybe European leaders will stick closer together. And yeah, we have to see what Donald Trump will do. I mean,
that's already quite a thing when you say European leaders will stick together. That's already quite a big thing to watch.
Maybe it's wishful thinking.
We'll see. Professor Wang, I know you want to say something, but you hold for a minute. Let me go to Mr. Lohaki first for him to wrap up his views. What's likely to happen next few days? Revolution or the turn of the history?
I think none of both will happen. I'm going to second Ms. Müller. I do think we will see much more of what we used to, the Europeans sticking together, everybody being awaiting Mr. Trump's behavior and being curious what he has to propose, what he's putting on the table. And I guess we will see that the Chinese and the Europeans will stick together as well, because they know what to expect from each other, which is, I'm afraid to say that, rather rare on the global scale in these very months.
All right. Professor Wang, your final shot.
Well, China and Germany, even they have some disputes and a different understanding about the domestic market economy. But today, they're much needed to have a guiding role and a leading role for the greater transformation of the humankind's, the way of thinking, way of producing, and the way of living. That
Professor
sustainable.
Wang is already talking about revolution over here.
Very important.
You seem very happy and very excited about everything to happen in the next few days. But certainly the world will focus our attention on the G20 summit in a few days from now. But for now, I want to thank all of you, the three of you coming from both China and Germany, sharing with us your insights. Hannah Mueller, Wang Yiwei, and Timo Lohaki. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're the best.
It was a pleasure.
You're watching World Insight with Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. Tensions between India and China have flared up after Indian troops crossed into Chinese territory to stop what they called a road getting built. And can the Asian giants use their shared membership of the deal to end the stalemate? We're going to ask those questions in a later discussion. And now let's turn to Doklam in Tibet, China, where Chinese troops and a group of Indian soldiers have been at the stalemate for around 20 days. It is the very first time that Indian troops overstepped the mutually recognized boundary line and crossed into the Chinese territory. China urged the Indian side to abide by the boundary convention, respect China's territorial integrity, and immediately withdraw its border troops back to the Indian side of the border.
Defending the sovereignty. Chinese Foreign Ministry on Monday described Indian troops' recent border crossing into Chinese territory as very serious.
The current situation is totally different from previous confrontations between the two countries' border troops, which happened at an undefined China-Indian boundary. Indian border troops overstepped the mutually recognized boundary line and crossed into Chinese territory. This move is a violation of the 1890 Convention, as well as the basic norms of the UN Charter and international laws. The violation is very serious.
The standoff took place on June 16th, when Indian troops approached a Chinese army unit and tried to stop them from building a road in the Doklam area near the Indian state of Sikkim. The Sikkim part of the border was settled in the convention between China and Britain in 1890. The convention has been upheld by previous Indian governments and was reaffirmed by the former Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal.
In a letter to then Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai on March 22, 1959, Nehru said the border of India's protectorate, Sikkim, and China's Tibet was defined by the 1890 Convention and marked by both sides on the ground in 1895. In another letter from Nehru to Zhou on September 26 the same year, Nehru repeated the statement, adding no dispute regarding the border between Sikkim and Tibet. From all the above, India's current move runs counter to its consistent position.
On Tuesday, Chinese ambassador to India, Luo Jiahui, expressed deep concern over the standoff. In an interview with the Press Trust of India, Luo said Indian troops need to unconditionally pull back to their side of the boundary. He stressed that both sides need to seek a peaceful solution to maintain tranquility in the border area. The crossing happened just ahead of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States. Some say the move is to show the U.S. that India has the power to contain China. Also last month, India officially joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Bilateral ties between China and India have never been more complicated.
For more discussion about that dispute and border tension in Beijing, we have two panelists joining us here. Yang Xiyu, Senior Research Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Also with us, Professor Wang Yiwei, stay with us from Renmin University. Joining us in New Delhi in India, we have Professor Madham Lalapat, who is Director of the Geopolitics and International Relations Department at Manipur University. Gentlemen, I want to welcome the three of you to our program. First of all, is there a way to resolve what is now a border tension and likely, if go on like this, a crisis? Let's have Professor Nalapat first from the Indian side.
Well, I'd like to point out that the entire border between India and China should be mutually agreed and delineated. And certainly, India would very much like to see this happen. Now, we have had situations in which we have said that Chinese troops have been crossing into Indian territory. In fact, some 300 such incidents take place on average every year. So all this is a consequence of the fact that we don't really have a sharply defined border. And of course, we've been talking about Nehru. Nehru sent many letters to Mr. Zhou Enlai, and in several of those letters, he claimed a large part of territories which are today regarded by China as Chinese territory. So I think, frankly, Nehru sent a lot of letters, and if we had to accept one letter, then it's difficult to understand why another letter is not accepted. My point is very simple. These are two big, mature countries. They need to sit down and work out a mutually acceptable border. After all these decades, it's very surprising this has not happened.
Okay. Mr. Yang, you want to respond to your Indian counterpart's view?
Well, I'm afraid I totally disagree with our Indian friends' argument, because the legal documents between countries, especially based on the convention signed by Chinese government and the British government more than 100 years ago, should be the legal base for all the border solution or settlement. While if you say some letter could be legal, some useful, some letters or documents are not useful, that will make the international order norms in chaos, especially in China-Indian disputes on the boundary.
I'm not sure whether all of you, any one of you, have read through all of the letters through both sides. So before we make a statement about exactly what all of those letters were about, we probably need to go a little bit more about the specific framework. That is exactly my question. Professor Wang, is there a way for the two sides to come out of this crisis or border tension?
Definitely, both sides, I think, would like to make this tension be continued, because I think either September the Xiamen summit, the BRICS summit, and particularly India just joined SCO, so it's a test for the new members. What kind of behaviors you are according not just international law but also SCO principles to peacefully solve your dispute with your neighbor. India actually, to be frankly, the problem, of course, you cannot just blame either side. It's because of the British colonialist period. And the Indians consider about it is the successor of all the India subcontinental and the Indian Ocean. This makes the Pakistan and even Nepal and other India's neighborhoods complain about that. So India has territory dispute with nearly with all the neighbors, not just with China. So that's a big burden of the British the colonies period. But so far, I think the Indian side should recognize that today's world is not the success of the colonial period.
I see. Before we go to that part of the regional issue, let's keep on focusing on this specific one. Professor Nalapat, it is no secret that China and India have been working on the border discussions and negotiations for decades. There are high times and there are low times. There are successful times, there are disappointing times. So the two sides have to, in a way, over the process of time, come to certain kinds of unspoken consensus. That is to let the discussion, while at the same time try to observe the bottom line of one another, and not to destroy or try to, in a way, blur some of the already mutually agreed or mutually abide by principles, or at least a consensus. So will this specific event be just one of those hiccups? Or will this specific event really sour the whole relationship, which is not sensible, I guess, for both sides to do? Professor?
No, I fully agree it's not sensible for India or China to have a bad relationship, but I simply want to point out that this particular piece of territory has a different significance to India than it does to China. India is a friendly country, so there's hopefully no question of any kind of a war between India and China. Now this territory, from the Indian side, if any military controls this territory, it can very easily break what India calls the chicken's neck. That's a very narrow area of land which links the entire northeast of India to the rest of India. It can create a situation in which Sikkim is threatened, and of course Bhutan is under very heavy pressure. From the Indian point of view, militarily, this is a very important piece of land.
Right.
So it is from that context, very frankly, that I believe that India is taking the stand. From the Chinese point of view, I don't believe militarily this is as important as some of the areas in the west and some of the areas in the east, because after all, this is a friendly neighbor, and frankly, after that unfortunate situation in '62, we have lived in complete peace. From our side, this territory is important because through that territory, the chicken's neck can be cut in a matter of 24 hours.
I see. Well, understanding the concern of the other side is the very start of having any dialogue and any discussion. That is exactly what we are doing right here. So, Professor Wang, after learning what Professor Nalapat has argued, what do you make of the reasoning of Professor Nalapat's words?
Firstly, India is very sensitive to China and its neighbors. We should understand about that psychology. But, importance is another thing. Principles, law is another thing. You cannot say that because it's the chicken of net, and then so we can do something and violate the principles and change the status quo. Even Indians make the Bhutan as Sikkim, and Sikkim be part of the India. So China didn't recognize as the territory of India. And then now, even in Nepal, they also want to make Nepal to another Bhutan, and then Bhutan to Sikkim. So make our territory more situations more worse and worse. So that kind of situation, I think we should change. Particularly the Indian psychology, mentality, I think should change in this regard.
So if I could just conclude what you just earlier said, are you suggesting, Professor Wang, that India has to realize to a certain extent that its neighbors, such as Bhutan, such as Nepal, should have their own freedom to establish, maintain, and have the nature of its relationship with its neighbors, for example, with China, rather than India having an impact on these countries in terms of the nature of the relationship that these countries will have and could have with China. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because of the 1962, the border conflicts,
Okay.
the memory is a burden of the India. So India very worried about China will take the opportunities of the high ground and then invade India. So they kick the chicken of the net. But I don't think this is Chinese behavior or Chinese intention. So I don't think the India will worry about it so much, too sensitive to that geography of the importance.
So Professor Nalapat, what about that argument? I mean, on the one hand, there is sensitivity for any culture, any country. But on the other hand, if a territory belongs to a country, it belongs to a country. And then if another country sends troops to an area that belongs to another country, there seems to be some violation of principles, as we earlier argued. Professor Nalapat, is that oversensitivity for India? And how will India deal with its relationship with the neighbors, particularly vis-a-vis, there is a China that is in India's neighborhood as well, while China also sees India as a big partner in the neighborhood too?
Well, I'd like to point out India has been a very good neighbor to China. For example, the Chinese trade surplus with India is some $50 billion. I mean, you were discussing Huawei in the last segment. Huawei, Xiaomi, and Chinese telecom companies almost taking control of the Indian market. Day after tomorrow, if not tomorrow, Chinese infrastructure companies, Chinese electricity companies will also play a very dominant role in the India market because of their quality and because of price advantages. So there is a lot to gain from good relations with India so far as China is concerned, and of course geopolitically so far as India is concerned. So my point is very simple. These things happen. There have been cases, for example, our state of Uttarakhand, we have seen Chinese troops come in and there have been some problems. Now these things happen. I don't think we should blow this up into almost like a warlike situation or a cause of war. I think we must understand these are local events and they should be dealt with locally, and in my view they should not be blown out of proportion.
Okay.
The overall relationship between India and China is too important for us to allow these small events to be blown out of proportion.
Okay. Professor Nalapat emphasized on the word local. Do not know necessarily interpretation of local. I only understand regional in that regard because we're talking about different countries together. Professor Yang, on the other hand, how should China see the latest situation? What are the measured and yet important attitude China should have toward what is going on right now? Well, and if I could, just related to Professor Nalapat's words, China and India are important partners.
Yep.
Chinese business people there in India seem to have an advantage, not because India giving preferential policies to Chinese businesses, but rather to their competitive edge. Having said that, though, still the two countries benefit from one another. And they should be, and they have to be, talking about regional. So, Mr. Yang, what should be the measured and the right approach from China? Let's just say from today on.
Well, first of all, I think the latest incident, we need to clarify two fundamental questions. Number one, is the Indian troops is in Chinese side or Chinese troops in the Indian side?
You mean the territories?
Yeah, territory. And the fact is, it is the Indian troops in Chinese side. And secondly, China was shocked. Chinese people, Chinese government was shocked by the incident because that is the first time for such a case, because that is the uncontroversial area. There are indeed several pieces of the territory disputed, but that area has never been disputed.
Over the past few decades.
This is the first time.
So that is what China is nervous about.
Yeah, nervous and shocked. And China's logic is controversial areas that belong to India. And this case indicated uncontroversial period also belong to India if India feels that's important. So that will open a very bad example for the bilateral relation. So for China, we believe, first thing first, let's return to the convention. signed by Chinese and the British government. And number two, return to the situation before the latest incidents. Then we can discuss what is India's concerns or what is China's interest.
But you know, it's interesting when you say this because principles are principles. If territories are territories, if every time when there is violations of territories, you go back to the negotiation table and talk about the principle once again, that seems to be not the principles that we're talking about here, Mr. Yang. What exactly are you suggesting here?
Well, I think we need to return to the legal arrangement. This area has been set by a mutually accepted legal arrangement. Okay. That's the fact. So return to the facts, and then we can discuss all issues through touch this issue by two militaries.
All right. Before we go, Professor Wang, there are so many things related to this. For example, this thing happened when the Prime Minister of India just visited the United States. And this also happened not far from the G20 summit. This also happened just a few months before the BRICS summit. This also happened right after India got the membership of the SCO. So a lot of a coincidence seem to be over there. I'm not trying to suggest anything. I'm just saying under these big circumstances, how should China and India approach each other from now on this issue and many others? Professor Wang, I only leave you with 30 seconds if you can. This is a huge topic, but Professor Wang, please help me.
I think India is an independent country. We do not trust that India will be used by the United States to want to do something to contain China or make trouble for China's territory. So we hope our friendship will continue not to be impacted by this incident. So India will return of that.
We hope that will be the case. For now, I want both from China and India, Madhav Nalapat, Wang Yiwei, Yang Xiyu. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to find us, World Insight CGTN in your search engine or check out YouTube channel of us. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight with Tian Wei team, thanks for watching. Tune in again tomorrow for insights across China and around the world. Good night.